Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. It was a warm, sunny day in the quiet town of Rausbad, just outside Melbourne, a day that seemed perfectly ordinary. 6-year-old Sheree, full of energy and excitement, set off on her bike to run a quick errand for her mom. With her pink hat and big smile, she was a familiar sight in the neighborhood, always on the move and full of life. But something went wrong that day. When Sheree didn't come home, her mom started to worry. Then, a neighbor found Sheree's bike abandoned on the side of the road, and fear set in. In this small, friendly community where everyone knew each other, no one could imagine that something so terrible could happen. What happened to Sheree that day would not only break her family's hearts but also leave the whole town in shock. The mystery of her disappearance was just the beginning of a story no one could have seen coming. Music. In 1985, in the quiet suburb of Rausbad, just outside Melbourne, Australia, Sheree came into the world as the first child of Carrie Greenhill. Despite not having the support or presence of Sheree's father, Carrie devoted herself to raising her daughter with the help of her family. Sheree embodied the innocence and joy of childhood, radiating a vibrant personality that made her the source of boundless happiness for those around her. As the firstborn, she held a special place in her mother's heart. Sheree was an energetic, talkative child, often amusing her mother with her non-stop chatter, even if it occasionally caused headaches. When her younger sister, Crystal, was born, Sheree took on the role of a doting older sister. Later, the family grew again with the birth of another baby, but tragedy struck when the infant passed away due to sudden infant death syndrome. The grief didn't end there. Carrie's partner, Crystal's father, suffered a fatal overdose not long after. Left alone with 2 small children, Carrie faced her struggles head-on, determined to provide the best life possible for her daughters. Her efforts paid off, as evidenced by Sheree's cheerful demeanor and boundless energy. By the age of 6, Sheree, with her freckled face and unruly hair, remained a lively, independent, and sociable child. One of her favorite pastimes was riding her bicycle around the neighborhood, exploring the natural beauty and tight-knit community of Rausbad. Sheree's days were filled with simple childhood pleasures. She attended first grade at the local school and was taught by her cautious mother to be mindful of strangers and always seek help if she felt unsafe. Carrie had drilled into her the importance of running to the nearest house for help if ever approached by someone unfamiliar. Tragically, those precautions would prove powerless against a lurking predator. On June 29, 1991, a sunny Saturday in Rausbad, the peaceful town awoke to its usual tranquility, unaware of the impending disaster. Sheree, brimming with energy, started her day withdrawing but quickly became restless. Eager to play, she ventured out to check if the neighborhood mini-golf course was open. Finding it closed, she returned home, only to make another trip later with the same result. Finally, she decided to run an errand for her mother, biking to a nearby dairy store. Carrie gave her money to buy milk, lemonade, meat pies, and some treats, along with a few cents for sweets. Donning a pink hat to shield herself from the sun, Sheree left the house after telling her mother she loved her. No one could have known it would be their last goodbye. It was common for children to roam the neighborhood on bikes. Unaware of being watched, Sheree pedaled away. Someone sinister was waiting. When Sheree didn't return after a few minutes, Carrie assumed her daughter had stopped by the mini-golf course. However, a neighbor soon came to the door reporting that Sheree's bike had been found abandoned on the roadside just outside the store. Overwhelmed by dread, Carrie knew something terrible had happened. As panic set in, she contacted the police, initiating a desperate search for the missing child. Though neighbors and officers initially tried to reassure Carrie, suggesting Sheree might simply be playing with friends, the hours dragged on with no sign of the little girl. A young witness claimed to have seen her getting into a man's vehicle, prompting a massive search effort involving volunteers, police officers, and emergency responders combing the area for any trace of Sheree. Carrie made a heartbreaking plea on national television, begging whoever had taken her daughter to return her safely. Flyers were distributed with Sheree's description, outfit, and last known location, but the search yielded no clues. As the hours turned to days, it became clear that Sheree had been abducted by a stranger. With no reliable leads and only vague details from a young witness about the vehicle, the investigation hit a dead end. Authorities set up an information center near the spot where her bike was found, and local schools provided counseling for parents and students. A month after Sheree's disappearance, a potential breakthrough emerged when a woman contacted investigators claiming she had seen Sheree and the man who allegedly abducted her. She described spotting them in a small blue vehicle traveling roughly 4 miles from where Sheree had vanished. The woman stated that Sheree was in the front passenger seat, visibly crying. Authorities immediately focused their efforts on identifying the vehicle described by the witness and the young girl who had witnessed the abduction. They also began investigating known sex offenders in the area. To encourage leads, a reward was offered for any information that could help locate Sheree. However, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the hope of finding Sheree alive began to fade. Despite this, the community's determination to find her never wavered. Tragically, the case took a devastating turn 3 months later. Authorities discovered the lifeless body of a child in a storm drain. Although there was initial speculation that it was Sheree, it wasn't until early DNA testing confirmed a genetic match that the heartbreaking truth was revealed. The news devastated Sheree's loved ones, particularly her mother, Carrie. The grim discovery became the topic of conversation in every home and public gathering. It was during one such discussion that therapist Margaret Hops was struck by the behavior of one of her patients. The patient, Robert Arthur Selby Lowe, was a seemingly ordinary man, well regarded in the community. At 57 years old, Robert was a salesman known for his eloquence. He also served as a youth cricket coach, a lay preacher, and a Sunday school teacher at his local church. He appeared to lead a respectable life with his wife, Lorraine, and their 2 teenage children. Lorraine often described their love story as a dream come true. Raised in an extremely religious household under the strict teachings of an evangelical sect, Lorraine found the environment oppressive. At 29, she prayed for someone special to enter her life. That changed when she met Robert after a church service and believed her prayers had been answered. Little did she know, she was stepping into a nightmare. Robert kept much of his past hidden from Lorraine. Beneath his facade of normalcy lay a dark history. At 19, he had stolen a car in England and attempted to run over a police officer, escaping with a minor fine. Later, in New Zealand, he was arrested for indecent assault on a minor and theft but again received only fines. Over the years, he faced charges for public indecency and spent 6 months in prison. After relocating to Australia, Robert continued his pattern of criminal behavior, accumulating over a dozen charges ranging from indecent conduct to prowling with sexual intent. Margaret had been treating Robert for years, working with him to address his inability to suppress his impulses. When news of Sheree's murder spread, it was only natural for the case to come up in their sessions, especially given Robert's criminal record. Subtle comments and gestures began to raise red flags for Margaret. Despite her professional ethics, which prevented her from directly accusing Robert, she anonymously reported her suspicions to a crime tip hotline. When that yielded no results, she decided to contact the police directly. Lacking forensic evidence tying Robert to Sheree's murder, the police initiated surveillance and even recorded his therapy sessions, hoping for a confession. The situation bore eerie similarities to the Silence of the Lambs as Robert teased Margaret with cryptic statements and half-confessions during their sessions. However, he never crossed the line into outright self-incrimination, leaving investigators frustrated. 2 years passed, and both detectives and Margaret began to lose hope. Then, the unexpected happened. One day, Robert handed Margaret a handwritten note confessing to Sheree's murder. Fully aware of her obligation to confidentiality, he believed she would be unable to act on his confession. Margaret, stunned and conflicted, knew she had to inform the police. However, events soon unfolded that prevented her from doing so. Shortly after, Robert was caught shoplifting a packet of chocolates at a convenience store. When officers searched his pockets, they discovered another copy of the incriminating handwritten confession. He was arrested for the minor theft but soon found himself facing questioning by detectives. Initially, Robert denied any involvement in Sheree's horrific murder. However, over time, his story shifted multiple times, and he began hypothesizing aloud about how the events might have unfolded if he had been involved. Investigators also uncovered that Robert had lied about his whereabouts on the day Sheree disappeared. A search of his home revealed disturbing material, explicit content involving minors, erasing any lingering doubts about his culpability. The discovery of Robert's dark side devastated Lorraine. After years of building a life and family together, she was forced to confront the horrifying reality that her husband was capable of such depravity. Her fairy tale romance had ended in the worst possible way. The lead detective on the case later remarked that he never fully understood the concept of evil until he encountered Robert. During the 1994 trial, the court heard chilling testimony. While in custody, Robert reportedly boasted to fellow inmates about killing Sheree, describing in graphic detail how he had strangled her and forced her to endure unspeakable acts. Lorraine also took the stand, revealing troubling details about Robert's obsessive fascination with other high-profile cases involving child victims. She testified that he had fixated on the 1991 murder of Carmen Chan, another young girl who suffered abuses eerily similar to Sheree. Before that, he had been equally obsessed with the infamous Azaria Chamberlain case, in which a baby disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leading to widespread speculation that her father, a prominent Seventh-day Adventist pastor, was involved. Lorraine recounted overhearing Robert express outrage over the police targeting good church-going people during the Azaria case. It later emerged that Robert had even written letters to Azaria's father, who became so unsettled by the correspondence that he contacted Margaret, Robert's therapist, asking her to discourage further communication. As the trial progressed, shocking details from Robert's therapy sessions were made public, leaving both the courtroom and the nation horrified. One particularly disturbing moment came when Robert, after Sheree's body was discovered in the storm drain, speculated in therapy about how worms might have consumed her remains. During the session, Margaret noticed something crawling on her arm. It was a worm. Robert had brought a bag of live maggots and released them during their session. Apparently, as a cruel joke, while Margaret's cooperation with law enforcement garnered sympathy, her actions also sparked debate about her professionalism. Torn between patient confidentiality and moral responsibility, Margaret navigated an unprecedented ethical dilemma. Robert's defense team seized on this, using it as a key argument to discredit her testimony and protect their client's interests. On November 30, 1994, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Robert was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, with his files marked to ensure they would never be made public, the harshest penalty available under Australian law. He was sent to the Hopkins Correctional Centre, confined to a section known as the Village of the Damned, reserved for the nation's worst sex offenders, kept segregated for their own safety. In the years following Sheree's tragic death, her family and community worked to honor her memory. A memorial service held on the anniversary of her murder became an occasion for collective mourning, but also a testament to the enduring impact she had on those who knew her. It was a moment to reflect on the joy Sheree brought to the world during her short life, ensuring she would never be forgotten. Margaret later penned a book about her experience titled Evil Inside, The Mind of a Child Killer. In it, she provided a unique psychological perspective on the case and detailed the ethical dilemmas faced by professionals in situations like hers. As for Robert, his notoriety resurfaced in 2010 when he was linked to a network distributing explicit content from within prison. Reports revealed that he had orchestrated the smuggling of illicit materials, including content involving minors, using USB drives and memory cards that were smuggled into the facility. Despite his sinister activities, Robert was simultaneously involved in mentoring young inmates with mental illnesses through a program offered by the prison. When news of his misconduct broke, Sheree's grandfather publicly expressed his outrage. He described Robert as the embodiment of pure evil and was appalled that someone like him could have access to computers and exploit other prisoners to satisfy his twisted desires. The grieving grandfather declared that he would only find peace once Robert was dead. He passionately called on state authorities to transfer Robert to a stricter prison, strip him of privileges, and confine him to a cement cell with minimal sunlight. He also urged the government to impose harsher penalties on criminals convicted of similar offenses. In a poignant revelation, Sheree's grandfather shared that during the investigation into her disappearance, the homicide unit had disclosed a chilling statistic. In the Rausbad area alone, there were over 4,000 registered offenders known to have a sexual attraction to prepubescent children. This number, coupled with Sheree's tragic fate, underscored the urgency of systemic reform to prevent such crimes. A spokesperson for the Minister of Prisons later confirmed that a full briefing on the allegations against Robert had been ordered and promised a response once all the facts were reviewed. The ensuing media storm, which included detailed coverage by one of Australia's leading newspapers, ultimately forced Robert to plead guilty to running the illicit network. But Robert's reign of terror didn't end there. Like something out of a horror film, 4 years later, on the 23rd anniversary of Sheree's murder, her mother, Carrie, was faced with another nightmare. Robert sent her a letter from prison, asking her to advocate for his release and urging authorities to reopen the investigation into Sheree's case. While time may have dulled the collective memory of the crime for the broader public, Carrie could never forget. She had endured tragedy after tragedy, and Robert's unsolicited letter only reopened old wounds. True to her resilient nature, Carrie refused to suffer in silence. She went to the media, condemning Robert as an irredeemably evil man devoid of humanity. Her public stand was a testament to her enduring strength in the face of unimaginable adversity. In 2021, to the relief of Carrie and her family, Robert died in prison at the age of 84. By then, Carrie had remarried and had 2 young granddaughters. Despite the passage of time and the new joys in her life, she still carried the daily grief of losing her vivacious and spirited Sheree. She often remarked that her second daughter, Crystal, reminded her of her firstborn. This resemblance had become a living memory of Sheree, as if in some way her presence lingered on through her younger sister. The case continues to raise important questions. Was Margaret right to break confidentiality to aid the police, as many believe, or should the principle of therapist-patient confidentiality be preserved at all costs, as others argue? The debate remains as complex and thought-provoking as the story itself. What do you think? If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.